Hello and welcome. Whether you're listening in the quiet hours of the night or resting in a calm moment during the day, this gentle journey invites you to step into a vast country shaped by shared routines, long winters, and quiet perseverance. Make yourself comfortable. Let your breath soften and slow. Allow the noise of the present to fade as we drift into the everyday rhythms of life in the Soviet Union. This is what daily life was really like in the Soviet Union, a serene, reflective exploration of how ordinary people lived, worked, and found moments of calm within a structured world. Take a slow, steady breath. As you exhale, imagine apartment blocks resting beneath pale morning light, windows glowing softly, stairwells echoing with footsteps, and kitchens warming as tea kettles begin to steam. The state looms large, yet daily life unfolds in small, familiar moments. In this peaceful retelling, there is no urgency, no confrontation, only gentle observation. We move slowly through days shaped by routine, noticing how time was organized and how people adapted with quiet resilience. Picture yourself standing in a neighborhood as the day begins. Trams hum along their routes, shops open with modest displays, families prepare for work and school, carrying bags, papers, and expectations. Evenings bring shared meals, conversations, and moments of rest by lamplight or radio. Though you remain safely where you are, you may sense the steady rhythm of Soviet life, a balance of structure, community, and personal space carved out within collective systems. In the chapters ahead, we'll explore daily life in the Soviet Union, how people lived in their homes, how they worked, queued, rested, and socialized, and how ordinary routines shaped identity and memory. We'll move gently through these moments, letting history unfold like a quiet snowfall settling across a wide landscape. For now, settle in, breathe deeply, and allow this peaceful journey into everyday Soviet life to begin. It is early morning in the late 1970s, and a pale light is just beginning to glow at the edges of the sky over the Soviet Union. In a modest fifth-floor apartment in Leningrad, a schoolteacher named Irina Mikhailovna awakens to the soft sound of her alarm clock. The room around her is small but orderly, a typical two-room Khrushchevka flat built in the 1960s. Living in such a flat is like living on a small boat. Every inch of space is cleverly used. By day, the sofa in the main room doubles as a bed at night, and the walls are lined with cupboards and shelves to hold the family's belongings. This morning, Irina slides her feet into worn slippers and gently folds away the bedding, transforming the sofa back into a couch. Her husband, Victor, still lies asleep in the other room behind a thin partition wall. She moves quietly so as not to wake him just yet. The apartment is cool, as the central heating has not fully warmed up the radiators. On this chilly morning, Irina wraps a woolen shawl over her shoulders and steps into the tiny kitchen. It is barely 6 square meters, just enough space for a small table, a couple of stools, and a single gas burner stove. On the windowsill sit 2 potted geraniums and yesterday's empty milk bottle, which she'll rinse and return for a deposit. Outside, the courtyard of the apartment block is still cloaked in dawn shadow. For a moment, Irina stands by the window and gazes out. She can see a few neighbors already up and about in the building across, silhouettes moving behind curtains. In the distance, the gold spire of the Peter and Paul Fortress catches the first light of day. The city is quiet, almost hushed, as if reluctant to fully wake. In the kitchen's stillness, Irina fills a dented metal kettle with water. The tap sputters a bit. The plumbing is old, but soon water flows and the kettle is set on the stove. She strikes a match to light the gas burner. A small blue flame springs to life with a soft whoosh. As the water heats, she prepares a simple breakfast. On a ceramic plate, she places a few slices of rye black bread, thick and hearty. One slice will be spread with butter, real butter, sparingly used since it's precious, and another with a thin layer of homemade black currant jam her mother sent from the countryside. From a tin on the shelf, she measures out dark loose-leaf tea into the teapot. This morning ritual of tea and bread is humble and unhurried. There is no rush of modern life here, only quiet preparation for the day. Irina moves carefully in the narrow space, mindful not to clatter dishes. She remembers her own childhood mornings in a komunalka, a communal apartment, when such calm was a luxury. Back then, she shared a single flat with several families, and morning meant jostling for a spot at the stove and a turn in the bathroom. She recalls waking to the sounds of multiple alarm clocks and neighbors shuffling in the corridor with their wash basins. The kitchen of that communal apartment would bustle at dawn with housewives in kerchiefs, each guarding a corner of the stove to boil tea or porridge. There was always a queue for the bathroom, and one had to be quick. As a little girl, Irina would clutch her own small bar of soap and towel, waiting her turn while listening to gentle scolding between Auntie Galia and Granny Zoya, two neighbors who fussed about someone leaving the sink dirty. Privacy was scarce, but camaraderie was real. Neighbors might quarrel over a misplaced pot or a borrowed cup of sugar, yet they also shared news and looked after each other's children. Remembering those days, Irina feels grateful for the relative peace of her own kitchenette now. This tiny flat, awarded to her and Victor some years ago, may be cramped, but it is theirs, a private haven away from the bustle of communal life. The kettle begins to whistle softly as she pours hot water into the teapot. The rich, earthy aroma of black tea rises into the cool air. Irina adds a spoonful of sugar from a glass jar and covers the pot with a knitted cozy to steep. In the other room, Victor stirs at the sound of the kettle and the faint fragrance of tea. Soon he emerges, tying the belt of his bathrobe. He yawns and offers his wife a warm Dobroje utro, good morning, his voice raspy from sleep. They sit together at the little kitchen table, knees almost touching under the table's edge. A single low-wattage bulb overhead casts a gentle yellow glow on their breakfast. They speak quietly, so as not to disturb the neighbors through the thin walls. On the table, steam rises from their tea glasses. Irina drinks hers from a traditional faceted glass set in a metal glass holder, a podstakanik, which protects her fingers from the heat. Victor stirs a bit of jam into his tea for sweetness and spreads a slice of bread with butter. Their meal is simple: buckwheat kashas, porridge, reheated from yesterday's pot and enriched with a dollop of butter, along with the bread and tea. Buckwheat porridge is Irina's favorite breakfast. Its nutty warmth brings comfort and steady energy for the morning. She recalls how her mother always said, "A good hot kasha will warm you from the inside out against the damp Leningrad cold." Victor, meanwhile, peels a boiled egg. He sprinkles it with a pinch of salt and takes a bite with a satisfied sigh. As they eat, Irina mentally reviews the day ahead. She has a full schedule teaching history at the local secondary school. Her first class is homeroom with her 8th graders at 8:30 a.m. She reminds Victor that in the evening she may be a bit late. She's on duty supervising the Pioneer After School Club. Victor nods. He'll be busy at the factory anyway. He works as an electrical engineer at a nearby plant that makes parts for radios and televisions. His shift starts a bit later, so he has time to take the trash out and perhaps tidy up after she leaves. Unspoken, they both know that most of the cooking and housework falls to Irina, even with her job, a common rhythm in Soviet households where women balanced professional life with the bulk of domestic chores. Victor, however, tries to help in small ways. Today, he will wash up the tea glasses and plates once she goes. By 7:15 a.m., the city is growing livelier. Through the window, Irina sees neighbors emerging into the courtyard, men in work jackets and flat caps walking briskly to catch the tram, women bundled in scarves carrying string bags, the ubiquitous avoska, always handy in case there's something to buy at the shops. A few children, cheeks ruddy in the cold, trot alongside parents on their way to kindergarten or primary school. From somewhere, a radio is playing the cheerful melody of the morning gymnastics broadcast, a peppy tune encouraging citizens to start the day with exercises. Irina smiles, picturing some diligent souls in nearby flats, following along with arm stretches and knee bends. She has a memory of her late father every morning tuning the radio to these exercises and doing them in their living room, touching his toes and rolling his arms as a crackly voice on the radio counted out, Raz, Diva, Tri, Chetir. 1, 2, 3, 4. Even now, in many Soviet homes, folks, especially the older generation, keep up that routine for health. Irina prefers a different ritual. After washing up and dressing, she spends a few quiet minutes at her desk, writing in her journal or drafting a letter. This morning, with a few minutes to spare, she decides to begin a letter to her son Alexei, who is away at university. Pulling her cardigan around her against the morning chill, she selects a blue aerogram, a foldable letter sheet, and uncaps her pen. Alexei, 20 years old, is in Moscow attending university, and Irina writes to him at least once a week. She writes slowly in neat cursive, "Dear Alyosha," and proceeds to tell him about the early signs of spring in Leningrad, how snow is finally melting off the rooftops, and how his father found extra apples at the market yesterday, a small triumph worth mentioning. She asks if he received the knitted socks his grandmother sent, and gently reminds him to dress warmly. Writing to her son connects her to him across the miles. It also gives a comforting routine to her morning, a moment of reflection before the day's work carries her away. Soon it's time to leave. Irina dons her work clothes, a dark knee-length skirt and a light blue blouse under a woolen cardigan. Over these she buttons up a heavy brown overcoat. Leningrad's weather is damp and chilly even outside of winter, so she winds a patterned wool scarf around her neck and pulls on warm gloves. She tucks her letter to Alexei in her handbag, planning to drop it at the postbox on the way. Victor, now dressed in his own work attire, gray trousers and a checkered flannel shirt beneath a thick jacket, steps out with her to walk her to the tram stop. They both wear their sturdy winter boots, a necessity on the still slushy sidewalks. As they exit into the communal stairwell of the building, the smell of cooked cabbage and fried onions lingers in the air, evidence of someone's breakfast or perhaps preparations for lunch. The neighbor on the landing below, a retired Navy officer, is already polishing his shoes in the corridor, humming a tune from old wartime days. He nods a polite good morning. Down another floor, the door of the Babarin family stands open for a moment as their school-age kids scramble out. The mother inside calls after them not to forget their lunch, piroshki. Irina and Victor descend the flights of stairs. The building has no elevator, being only 5 stories, a signature of Khrushchev-era architecture. The metal banister is cold to the touch. They emerge outside into the crisp air. Leningrad's streets are coming alive. The sun, still low, casts a pearly light on the pastel facades of old buildings and glints on puddles of melted snow. Irina and Victor walk together to the tram stop at the end of their block. Around them, other residents are making their way along the sidewalks, some quickly, heads down against a light breeze, others in unhurried, companionable pairs. A group of factory workers in grease-stained overalls share jokes as they head to the bus stop. 2 women with red pioneer scarves neatly tied under their chins escort a cluster of young children across the street toward a kindergarten, the little ones toddling in thick cotton tights and padded coats. At the tram stop, a few people are already waiting. The tram rails gleam faintly. Soon, with a clatter and a ding of its bell, the tram arrives, a red and cream electric streetcar. Victor squeezes his wife's hand and bids her goodbye for the day. He'll turn off at the corner and pick up a loaf of bread from the bakery when it opens, then head to his own job. Irina steps onto the tram along with a small crowd. Inside, it's warm and crowded with morning commuters. She finds a spot to stand, holding onto a leather strap. As the tram lurches forward, she sways and looks around. Faces are familiar. The city's early risers, nurses heading to the hospital, other teachers, office clerks clutching briefcases, elderly ladies off to queue at shops early. Many are quiet at this hour, lost in thought, or listening to the conductor's announcements. The tram rumbles down its route, crossing over the Fontanka River Canal. Irina steals a moment to admire her city. The water below is iced at the edges, and elegant bridges arch over the canal. Rows of bare-branched trees line the embankments, promising green in a month or 2. Passing a newsstand, she sees a delivery man unloading fresh bundles of Pravda and Izvestia, the major newspapers, news of the party, of Brezhnev's meetings, of tractor, production, and ballet triumphs, all printed and ready for the citizenry. Some passengers carry newspapers tucked under arm. One bespectacled man in a heavy coat is already engrossed in an article about the latest 5-year plan targets, his brow furrowed in concentration. Life in the Soviet Union is suffused with talk of plans and production, but on this tram the riders seem more concerned with their own daily missions, getting to work, obtaining food, caring for family. Meanwhile, hundreds of kilometers away in Moscow, another young Soviet morning is unfolding. In a drafty student dormitory on the outskirts of the capital, Alexei, Irina's son, awakens to his cheap alarm clock ringing at 7:08 a.m. He groans softly and reaches from under a heap of blankets to silence it. The dorm room is small and shared with one other roommate, a fellow student who is still snoring soundly on the top bunk. Alexei's breath mists slightly in the cold air of the room. The radiator here often clanks and hisses, but doesn't give quite enough heat. Rubbing sleep from his eyes, he sits up on his narrow lower bunk and folds his quilt. Above him on the wall, a few posters are taped, one of a cosmonaut floating amid stars, his boyhood inspiration, and another of the Bolshoi Theater's ballet company in mid-leap. His roommate's sister is a ballet student, hence the interest. Alexei shuffles to the little communal washroom at the end of the hall, soap and towel in hand. Several other dormitory residents are already up and queuing sleepily to splash water on their faces or brush their teeth at the shared sinks. The tile floor is chilly underfoot. A couple of girls in bathrobes giggle about an upcoming exam as they braid each other's hair. A young man is carefully shaving in a streaky mirror. It's a typical student morning routine, communal yet familiar. Alexei exchanges friendly nods with a Georgian student brushing his teeth next to him, and endures a bit of good-natured teasing from an older dorm mate about looking half asleep. There is camaraderie in these close quarters. Dozens of young people from different corners of the USSR living under one roof, sharing stories, sharing worries about studies, sometimes sharing food, and certainly sharing the single telephone in the hallway. If someone cooks to pelmeni, dumplings, or finds a treasure like fresh sausages, often it means an impromptu gathering in one room, everyone invited. But right now, minds are mostly on the day ahead. After washing, Alexei dresses in his usual student attire, simple brown trousers, and a pale checked shirt under a well-worn sweater. He takes a moment to shine his shoes with a rag. Moscow streets are muddy this time of year, and combs his dark hair. Before leaving his room, he neatly makes his bed. It's something his grandmother Nina always stressed, that a tidy bed starts a tidy day. Feeling a pang of hunger, he heads to the dormitory kitchen down the hall. It's a communal kitchen with a couple of electric hot plates and a shared table. The remnants of prior meals cling to the atmosphere, the faint aroma of boiled potatoes and yesterday's buckwheat. This morning, only one other student is there, Tanya from the literature faculty, cradling a steaming mug of chai, tea, and trying to memorize notes for a test. Alexei gives her a little wave and quietly brews his own tea on a free burner. He has a bit of yesterday's bread left and a hard-boiled egg which he peels for breakfast. The two students share the space in companionable silence, each sipping tea, each absorbed in their thoughts. From a window of the kitchen, Alexei can see the sprawling campus of Moscow State University in the distance, the great tower of its main building rising high and proud. Even under gray morning clouds, it's an inspiring sight, a symbol of higher learning and Soviet ambition. As he eats, Alexei's mind wanders. At this hour, his mother must be on a tram in Leningrad. The thought gives him comfort and a little homesickness. He remembers how, back home, his mother would always insist he eat a hot cereal or drink a glass of milk before school. Here he has more freedom, perhaps too much freedom, he muses with a grin, thinking of the student canteen lunches he sometimes skips, or the late nights he's stayed up discussing philosophy and poetry with friends. Still, he's kept the habit of morning tea and something to bite. It reminds him of home and keeps him steady through early lectures. By 7:45, the dormitory is buzzing. Doors open and close as students hurry out, some with textbooks clutched to their chests, others shrugging on coats while chewing the last bit of breakfast. The hallway echoes with banter in multiple accents: Russian, Ukrainian, Uzbek, Georgian, a microcosm of the USSR's many peoples. Alexei grabs his satchel, stuffed with notebooks and a textbook on engineering mathematics, and heads out into the city. Moscow greets him with brisk air and the energetic pulse of a metropolis. The dorms are a short walk from a metro station, and as Alexei approaches the entrance, he joins a river of commuters flowing down the steps into the subway. The Moscow metro in the morning is a world unto itself. Elegantly decorated stations flash by as he boards a train: marble pillars, grand mosaics of Soviet heroes, and harvest scenes overhead. But the commuters pay little notice to the beauty. They are focused on getting to destinations. Alexei manages to squeeze into a carriage just before the doors beep and slide shut. Inside the metro car, bodies are pressed close. He stands swaying with the motion as the train hurtles beneath the city. The air carries a mix of cold drafts and a hint of heavy wool coats and cologne. Many passengers are engrossed in newspapers or small books. A man reads the latest news about a space probe launch. An elderly woman knits steadily, using even this commute time to create something useful. Two schoolboys in identical uniforms whisper Latin conjugations to each other for a quiz. At a stop, more people pour in, and Alexei yields his spot by the door to an older gentleman with a cane. He grabs a handle and finds himself next to a young woman carrying a bouquet of carnations. Likely a teacher, he thinks, because today is International Women's Day, and perhaps her students gifted those to her. Actually, it is March 8th, a major holiday celebrating women, when students give flowers to teachers, men give flowers to colleagues and loved ones. Realizing this date, Alexei smiles and remembers that he sent his mother a postcard for the occasion. She should receive it any day now. The young woman with the carnations notices his gaze and smiles politely. The scent of the flowers amid the drab subway car is a sweet reminder of spring and appreciation. On this day, many women in the city will walk around with blossoms in hand and a modest pride in their eyes. Alexei transfers lines and eventually emerges at his stop near the university. Climbing the metro escalator, the escalators here are so steep and long, they plunge deep into the earth. He is carried upward among a mass of humanity. At the top, he steps out into the cool morning again. The campus paths are busy with students and professors heading to classes. He notices some are pinning small red paper flowers to their lapels or wearing ribbons. Likely there will be a little ceremony or speeches honoring women's staff at noon today. Hurrying across the plaza toward the Faculty of Engineering building, Alexei feels the excitement of the day stir within him. Despite the routine, each day at university still carries a spark, a new theory to grasp, a lively debate in history class, or just the camaraderie of lunchtime in the cafeteria with friends from all over the country. His stomach rumbles a bit. Bread and an egg can only do so much. But he knows around 1 p.m. he'll get a filling meal at the student stolovaya canteen, perhaps cabbage soup, a scoop of mashed potatoes, and a cutlet, all for a subsidized price that his stipend covers. As the morning unfolds in Moscow, far to the east, beyond the Ural Mountains, Another day is dawning in a Siberian industrial city. Sergei, a 40-year-old factory worker, steps out of the simple barracks-like dormitory where he lives during the work week. The sun is only just peeking over the endless taiga forest on the horizon. Sergei's breath puffs in white clouds in the sub-zero air. It is still winter deep in Siberia, with snow stretching in unbroken blankets around the clusters of factory buildings and worker housing. He has a small apartment elsewhere in town where his wife and young son live. But this month he's on an intense shift schedule at the steel plant, so he's been sleeping at the on-site dorms for a few nights in a row. Many of the workers do that during crunch times, taking turns, going home on weekends. He stamps his feet to shake off the cold and shoulders his way into the plant's entrance, joining the stream of laborers arriving for the morning shift. It's a tough life out here, the hours long, the climate harsh, but Sergei often reflects with quiet pride that he is helping build something important. The plant produces steel girders and machinery parts vital for construction projects and infrastructure across the USSR. Each day's output is measured and reported in fulfillment of the plan. Hard work and routine form the backbone of his days. Inside the locker room, Sergei exchanges greetings with his comrades as they change into heavy work overalls and steel-toed boots. The air smells of machine oil and lingering coal smoke. Many of these men are friends he arrived with a decade ago when the plant was being expanded, young Komsomol volunteers back then, eager and idealistic, ready to earn good pay and do their part in taming the wilds of Siberia. Now they are middle-aged, faces lined by years of labor and winter wind, but a steady camaraderie remains among them. They chat about small things, the latest hockey game on the radio, a new shipment of winter jackets at the work supply store whose wife is expecting a baby soon. One mentions that the boiler in their apartment block is acting up again. Another laughs that at least their block has hot water this week, unlike last. By 8:00 a.m., a loud whistle blows, signaling the shift start. Sergei heads onto the factory floor. The cavernous hall is already alive with noise, the clanging of metal, the drone of furnaces, the echo of voices calling orders. Overhead, cranes glide with massive loads of raw steel. Sergei's station this week is in the casting section, where molten steel is poured into molds. It's grueling work, standing near the fiery crucible. Even in winter, the heat is intense. Sweat forms on his brow beneath the helmet and protective goggles he wears. Alongside a partner, he uses a long pole to help tip the giant ladle and guide the white-hot stream of liquid metal into waiting forms. Sparks sometimes fly like fleeting stars. He does this with practiced precision. It's almost meditative in its own way, the focus and careful timing required. In quieter moments, he often thinks of his family while he works. His wife Galia and their little boy Kolya back at home in their apartment across town. That apartment is another tiny Khrushchevka, not unlike his sister Irina's in far-off Leningrad, though perhaps a bit more worn at the edges given the rough Siberian environment. It's on the third floor of a concrete block building hastily constructed when the factory expanded, utilitarian and plain, but a home nonetheless. Right now, Galia is likely bundling up Kolya to take him to the Detki Sadik, children's daycare, before she heads to her own job as a clerk at the post office. Sergei smiles to himself, picturing his son stubbornly insisting on wearing his favorite knitted hat with the pom-pom, or refusing to eat his morning acacia unless his mother sprinkles a little sugar on top. It's these tender domestic images that warm Sergei better than any furnace heat. He reminds himself that tomorrow is Saturday and he'll have off. He can go home tonight and surprise them a day early. Maybe bring a treat from the factory shop. They sometimes have access to things like canned meat or fresh bread for workers. By mid-morning, Sergei's arms ache from the labor, but he continues steadily. The work is punctuated by the blare of the factory loudspeaker overhead, which occasionally crackles with announcements, reminders of a production target, or a congratulatory message to a team that exceeded quotas. Sometimes they play music or an upbeat patriotic song to keep morale up. Sergei has heard his share of marches and optimistic tunes about the motherland echo through these halls. Oddly enough, he finds them comforting now. They blend into the routine noise of creation. There's also an industrial rhythm that sets in, the thump of presses, the hiss of steam, the synchronized movements of men and machines. Working in unison, his crew achieves a reliable flow. There is pride in doing a job well, even if it's physically exhausting. During a brief pause in the workflow, he steps aside to drink water and notices out the high windows, the endless stretch of birch forest beyond the factory grounds. The birch trees are dusted with fresh snow, standing silent guard. This is a new city, born just decades ago from nothing. Before the factory, it was pure wilderness. Now it's a place where thousands live and work, children go to school, life marches on. Sergei feels a small swell of pride. He is one of those pioneers who built up this city. It wasn't easy moving here from his home village many years back, but he'd do it again for the opportunities it gave. As these characters start their days across the Soviet Union, Irina on her tram in historic Leningrad, Alexei stepping onto campus in mighty Moscow, Sergei toiling in the belly of a Siberian factory, another morning is unfolding in a much quieter corner of the country. In a tiny village in the countryside, Nina Ivanovna wakes with the sun. Nina is Irina's mother and Alexei's beloved grandmother. She is 70 years old, so a widow, and has lived in this provincial village all her life. Her home is a simple, one-story wooden cottage, an izba, with white-painted window frames and a steeply pitched roof to shed the snow. Inside, the walls are lined with old woven rugs to keep out drafts, and at the center of the main room stands a large brick stove. This stove, Pechka, is the heart of her home, providing warmth and a place to cook. In fact, the top of the stove is broad enough that one can sleep on it, and Nina often rests there on frigid winter nights, letting the residual heat comfort her aging bones. She rises from her bed near the stove as dawn's light slips through the embroidered curtains. The roosters in the village have already crowed. There is no alarm clock here. The rhythms of nature have always guided her. Nina pulls on a thick cotton shawl and lights a small oil lamp to navigate the dusky morning interior. Electricity exists in the village, but she's frugal and often prefers the gentle glow of a lamp at dawn. First things first, she needs to stir up the stove and get some heat going. Kneeling by the stove's hearth, she opens the cast iron door and adds a few pieces of dry birch wood from the stack she gathered last evening. With practiced hands, she strikes a long match and lights a twist of newspaper tucked under the logs. Soon, orange flames lick at the wood, and a pleasant crackling fills the room. She closes the stove's door, allowing the fire to draw. Nina stands and breathes in the faint smell of wood smoke mixing with the chill air of the cottage. She allows herself a moment to stretch. Through her small window, she sees a frosty landscape tinted pink by the sunrise. The dirt road through the village is quiet. Smoke curls lazily from neighbors' chimneys, signifying others are kindling their morning fires too. It is peaceful here. The loudest sounds are perhaps a cow lowing softly from the barn or the distant bark of a dog. Life in the village has a slower, gentler pace than the busy cities where her children now live. Sometimes, standing in the early morning stillness, Nina feels that the decades fall away and she's a girl again on her parents' farm, rising before dawn to milk the cows or fetch water. The continuity of these routines is a comfort. She wraps her warm shawl tighter and steps outside to fetch water from the well. The air is crisp and her breath puffs white. Under her felt boots, the snow, or mud depending on the season, let's imagine it is late winter turning to spring, crunches lightly. She carries 2 metal buckets, one in each hand, and walks the short path to the village well. A couple of neighbors are already out and about despite the cold. She waves to old Vasily, who is leading his single cow out of the barn for the morning feeding. The animal's breath steams, and the cow swings her tail contentedly. Farther down, young Olga from the next cottage is chopping wood, preparing fuel for her own stove. Olga pauses to call out cheerily, "Good morning, Nina Ivanovna." Nina responds in kind, reminding Olga that she'll stop by later with some fresh eggs. The sense of community in this tiny place is strong. Everyone knows each other and looks after one another in small ways. At the well, Nina balances a bucket on the edge and uses the pulley to lower a smaller pail down into the water. The well water is ice cold and clear. With a practiced motion, she hauls up enough to fill both her buckets. Though she is not young, she is still sturdy. Years of manual tasks have kept her surprisingly spry. With water sloshing gently in the buckets, she heads back inside, careful on the potentially slippery threshold. Back in the warmth of her kitchen, Nina fills the kettle and sets it atop the stove, where the fire is now burning steadily. She also pours some of the fresh water into a large enamel basin. This will be for washing up and any cleaning needed. There is no running tap water in her cottage, so every drop is precious and used efficiently. As the kettle heats, she prepares her breakfast. From the cupboard, she takes a handful of barley groats and a pinch of salt to cook a simple porridge on the stove. She also takes out a loaf of rustic sourdough rye bread that she baked a couple of days ago in the oven of the stove. It's dense, slightly sour, and very filling. Slicing off a thick piece, she finds some leftover lard, salo, to spread thinly on it. That, with a clove of garlic rubbed over the bread for flavor, will be a savory treat. Nina keeps a samovar, a traditional metal teapot urn, on a side table, but she doesn't bother firing it up just for herself this morning. The kettle will do for tea. She scoops a bit of Georgian tea, the kind that comes in simple paper packaging, into her small teapot, and as the kettle starts to whistle, she pours the bubbling water over it. The room fills with the fragrance of strong tea and wood smoke, a combination that to her is the smell of morning. While her porridge simmers, Nina tidies up. She sweeps the floor with a broom of birch twigs, clearing bits of dirt or chaff that may have been tracked in. She folds the quilt on her bed and straightens a hand-woven rug near the stove. Every movement is calm and deliberate, part of a well-worn pattern of life. Living alone, she has no one else to fuss over now, and sometimes that thought makes her feel a pang of loneliness. But she quickly casts it aside by humming a little tune, an old folk lullaby she used to sing to Irina and Sergei when they were babies. Humming keeps the spirits up, as her mother taught her. Soon the porridge is ready, a modest barley cacha made tasty with a pat of butter and a drizzle of last summer's honey. She has a jar left from when a neighbor's bees did well. Nina settles at her small wooden table by the window with her breakfast. On the tablecloth, embroidered by her own mother decades ago, she sets her bowl, the slice of bread and lard, and her steaming cup of tea. Before she eats, she pauses, folds her hands, and murmurs a quiet blessing, an old habit from her Orthodox upbringing. The state may be officially atheist now, but in Nina's heart, faith still lives in these little rituals. A whispered thanks, a sign of the cross made when no one's looking. It gives her comfort and a sense of continuity with her ancestors. The Samagon, home icon, of St. Nicholas in the corner of her room watches over her with faded benevolence, a tiny oil lamp beneath it, unlit at the moment. She takes her breakfast slowly. Looking out the window, she savors the view. The morning sun is higher now, illuminating the patchwork of vegetable gardens behind each cottage. In winter, they lie dormant under snow, but soon enough she will be out there turning the soil, planting potatoes, carrots, and beets, the staples that will see her through next winter. She imagines the green shoots already. A few sparrows flutter down to peck at some crumbs on her windowsill left from yesterday. Nina delights in their company. She sometimes feels like the birds are little friends who come to visit. As she crumbles a bit of her bread and sets it outside for them, she thinks of her grandson Kolya, Sergei's boy, who loves feeding birds when he visits. The thought of her family warms her even more than the tea. This peaceful village morning for Nina is in stark contrast to the urban routines of her children, yet it is part of the same Soviet tapestry of daily life. The old and the new, the rural and the urban, all are connected by family ties and the common experiences of getting through each day with purpose and hope. As the morning progresses toward afternoon across these different settings, each of our characters carries on with their day. What unites them, whether in a bustling city or a sleepy hamlet, is a sense of rhythm and resilience. There is a collective understanding among Soviet people that everyday life may not be luxurious or easy, but it has its own richness. The warmth of tea shared with loved ones, the pride in one's work or studies, the support of a neighbor or comrade, and the small routines that give comfort and structure. In the Soviet Union, morning is not rushed or frenetic. It unfolds gradually, allowing people to gather their strength for the day ahead. From Irina's careful tea-making in Leningrad, to Alexei's dormitory breakfast in Moscow, to Sergei's labors in Siberia, to Nina's solitary meal by the stove, each is a gentle thread in the vast tapestry of Soviet daily life, a tapestry soon to be woven further as the day continues into work, study, and the communal interactions of midday. The workday, factories, schools, and studies. By mid-morning, the Soviet workday is in full swing, each person absorbed in their duties. From the cities to the countryside, millions are engaged in labor or learning. In our vignette, we follow Irina the teacher, Alexei the student, Sergei the factory worker, and others as they navigate the busy but structured hours of their day. Though their environments differ vastly, a classroom, a university hall, a factory floor, a village lane, there is a common rhythm of diligence and communal purpose that characterizes the Soviet workday. Irina Mikhailovna arrives at school number 42 in Leningrad with a few minutes to spare before the first bell. The school building is a sturdy three-story structure from the 1930s, with tall windows and wide corridors. At the entrance, a bust of Lenin on a pedestal greets all who enter, a red banner draped behind it, proclaiming Uchitsa, Uchitsa, I Uchitsa. Study, study, and study, Lenin's famous encouragement to education. Irina steps into the foyer and pats the snow from her boots. Students in brown school uniforms, the girls in chocolate brown dresses with white collars and pinafores, the boys in matching brown suits, scurry through the halls, some still tugging on their red young pioneer scarves as they rush to get in line for assembly. It's customary that each morning, students gather with their class for a short homeroom or a school-wide assembly on Mondays. Today, as Irina enters her homeroom class of 8th graders, she finds them chattering excitedly at their desks. The classroom is typical of Soviet schools: high ceilings, large windows now steamed from the indoor warmth versus outside chill, portraits of Marx, Engels, Lenin, and yes, a photograph of Leonid Brezhnev on the wall above the blackboard. In one corner stands a globe and a shelf of well-worn textbooks. In another, a nature corner with a couple of potted plants that students water in turns. On the front wall, the day's date is written neatly in chalk, along with a thought for the day, a quote from a famous writer or a revolutionary hero. Today, in Irina's careful cursive, it reads, Человек без труда, что чайник без воды. A person without work is like a teapot without water. A gentle reminder of the value of hard work. Good morning, class, Irina says in a clear, warm voice as she sets her bag on the teacher's desk. The students stand up in unison, a sign of respect drilled into them, and return her greeting. Zdravstvuyte, Irina Mikhailovna. Their voices sing-song together. She nods and motions for them to sit. They're a lively group, about 14 years old, full of energy and curiosity. Some still have the round faces of childhood. Others are beginning to show the angles of approaching adulthood. There's the usual shuffle of notebooks and textbooks being taken out. As homeroom begins, they run through daily rituals. The class captain, a serious girl named Olya, with neatly braided hair, stands at attention to report attendance and any announcements. Today, for example, she reminds the class that tomorrow there will be a school-wide sabbatnik, a voluntary community cleanup day, so everyone should bring work gloves. Irina adds with a smile that they'll likely be raking leaves in the schoolyard or sweeping the gym, turning work into a shared event with a festive spirit as is tradition. The students nod. Many secretly enjoy sabbatniks because it means a break from regular lessons and a chance to chat while working outdoors. Next, a few students share brief news. One boy excitedly tells how his father got a certificate of honor at the factory for hitting a production quota. A girl mentions a new library book she read about Pavlik Morozov, the legendary and controversial pioneer hero. Irina listens and gently guides the discussion, praising each for their contributions. This is how ideological and moral education is subtly woven into daily life, by reinforcing values of hard work, patriotism, and community pride through simple sharing. On the chalkboard, they have a small section called Today in History, and Irina asks if anyone knows what happened on this date. A hand shoots up. Victor, named after a war hero and living up to it by being a history buff, proudly states that on this day in 1961, Yuri Gagarin was formally introduced to the Supreme Soviet after his space flight. The class breaks into applause, faces shining. Though they were just toddlers then, the space achievements are a huge point of national pride, and Gagarin is a beloved name. Homeroom ends and regular classes commence. Irina has a full day of teaching ahead. History and social studies primarily. First period, she teaches a section on the Great Patriotic War, World War II. As the students open their textbooks to the chapter on the Siege of Leningrad, a reverent hush falls. Here, in this city that survived that horrific siege, history is not just abstract words. Irina speaks softly yet firmly, describing how citizens endured hunger and cold but never gave up. She incorporates personal elements too. She tells the class that her mother, Grandmother Nina, was a teenager during the siege, having to care for younger siblings as the city starved. The students listen with wide eyes. They've heard official accounts before, but Irina's gentle human storytelling makes it real and heartfelt. She passes around a facsimile of a ration card from the war, explaining how each tiny scrap of bread was precious. The lesson is somber, but also uplifting, emphasizing the resilience and unity of the Soviet people. At the end, they stand for a moment of silence in memory of those who perished, a common gesture in schools when covering the war. Outside the window, the winter wind rattles a little, as if echoing distant memories. Irina sees some students blink back tears of empathy and knows that in this moment, the past has truly touched them. In the hallway during a short break, the school bustles. Younger children in the primary classes skip in 2 straight lines behind their teacher on the way to physical education, red pioneer neckerchiefs bobbing. Older students cluster by their lockers, discussing math problems or trading gossip about a new movie showing in the cinema. 2 boys practice a few dance steps for an upcoming school cultural program, laughing as they almost collide with a teacher carrying a pile of books. That teacher good-naturedly shoos them aside and reminds them to be at rehearsal on time. The school's pionervojati, pioneer leader, a sort of youth counselor, strides by, reminding a group of kids about a meeting later to plan the May Day celebration. The smell of cabbage soup starts wafting from the cafeteria down the hall. The cooks are already preparing the day's lunch. It's a familiar, comforting smell to Irina. It reminds everyone of the meal to come and gives a little energy to make it to midday. Irina's next class is social studies, which in Soviet times often blended civics with ideology. Today's topic, moral code of the builder of communism. It's a list of virtues all good Soviet citizens should aspire to: love of the motherland, honest labor, collectivism, respect for elders, etc. Irina knows some of her students might internally roll their eyes at the dry language. 14-year-olds can be a bit cynical, so she tries to bring the ideas to life with practical examples. She divides the class into small groups and gives each a scenario. For instance, your collective farm's harvest is in danger of rotting under unexpected rain. What do you and your pioneer troop do? Or you find a lost wallet on the street. How do you handle it in the spirit of the moral code? The students discuss animatedly and then share answers. Naturally, they volunteer to help save the harvest, and they turn the wallet ends to the nearest militia station. These are the textbook correct answers, but the act of working through it makes it less of a rote lecture. One bold student, Andrei, raises a hand and asks a pointed question. Irina Mikhailovna, the moral code says we should be modest and avoid extravagance, but I read in a magazine that some of our pop singers drive fancy foreign cars. Isn't that against the code? A few classmates giggle or look shocked at his daring. Irina has to navigate this carefully. With a calm smile, she responds that the moral code is an ideal everyone should strive for, and while not everyone is perfect, it's important not to jump to conclusions based on hearsay. She gently steers it toward a lesson on not spreading rumors and focusing on one's own behavior. Still, she admires the boy's courage to question. As a teacher, especially of history and social studies, she must walk a fine line, encourage critical thinking, but not veer into criticism of authorities. In her heart, she knows the students are growing up more aware of contradictions, but she hopes to instill in them a sense of optimism and personal integrity. Meanwhile, over in Moscow, by mid-morning, Alexei's own classes are underway. He sits in a large lecture hall at his university, surrounded by dozens of other students. The hall has high ceilings and wooden seats that have accommodated generations of learners. On the wall hangs a red banner with the university's emblem and a slogan, "Study is light, ignorance is darkness." Their professor, a bespectacled man in a rumpled suit, is delivering a lecture on advanced mathematics, specifically differential equations. Equations and Greek symbols fill the blackboard. Some students scribble notes furiously. Others struggle to stay focused, especially those who might have stayed up late in a dorm room chat or preparing for another exam. Alexei is concentrating intently. Mathematics isn't his strongest suit, but he's determined to grasp the material. He glances occasionally at the student next to him to compare notes. They exchange a quick smile of mutual commiseration at the complexity of the content. The professor punctuates the abstract theory with a real-world example, calculating trajectories for rocket flight. Immediately, the room's interest perks up. This is, after all, the space age, and these young people have grown up under the shadow of Sputnik and Gagarin. Linking math to the glory of the space program is a surefire way to grab attention. Alexei imagines, just for a second, that perhaps one day his work could contribute to such endeavors. It's a motivating thought that carries him through the rest of the lecture, scribbling down the solution of a differential equation that models a rocket's ascent. After math class, Alexei has a short break. He and a couple of friends slip into the corridor. The university corridors are an interesting sight, a mix of students like him in plain clothes and others in military-style uniforms, cadets from various institutes, earnest young women clutching literature anthologies, serious young men carrying drafting tools for engineering courses. On bulletin boards, announcements are pinned everywhere. Upcoming Komsomol meetings, the Communist Youth League, which nearly every student is a member of, a notice about a lecture series on Marxist-Leninist philosophy, attendance expected, a flyer for a concert by the student folk choir, and even a poster advertising volunteer work on a Saturday to help build a playground in a new suburb, part of the many community initiatives. Alexei and his friends, one from Minsk, one from a small town on the Volga, decide to get some fresh air. They walk through the hall, past a large mural that depicts enthusiastic young builders and scientists under the radiant sun of communism. The imagery might be propaganda, but the sentiment resonates in a place like this, full of youth with aspirations. They descend the stone steps of the university's front entrance and stand outside for a few minutes, breathing in the crisp, late morning air. The campus grounds are busy. Some students lounge on benches reading or chatting. A group of architecture students across the way are making sketches of an old oak tree, and a few professors stroll together discussing their research. The trio of friends talk about trivial things at first. The latest issue of Novi Mir magazine, which had an interesting short story, the challenge of finding a good pair of winter boots in the stores lately, always a matter of luck and timing, and whether anyone has managed to get tickets to the new movie playing downtown. A hit comedy that has everyone quoting lines. Then their conversation turns to their studies and the future. "Do you ever think about our distribution?" asks Ivan, the friend from the Volga. He's referring to the system where after graduation, students are assigned jobs, often in parts of the country where specialists are needed, for a couple of years. It's both an exciting and anxious prospect. One could be sent anywhere from a prestigious institute in Moscow to a remote city in Siberia or Central Asia. Alexei nods thoughtfully. Yes, he does wonder. It's the spring of his third year. By next year, he'll know. "I requested something in Leningrad," he says, "to be closer to my folks." The others understand. Many try for postings near home, but they also know the state might have other ideas, sending them where their skills serve best. Still, there is an undercurrent of adventure in not knowing. The country is huge and full of possibilities. As the break ends, they decide to drop by the Chustum University Library to return some books before the next class. The library is a hushed sanctuary of knowledge. High wooden shelves line every wall, filled with volumes on science, literature, history, and philosophy. A portrait of Pushkin and another of Lenin watch over the reading room. Students sit at long tables with green desk lamps, flipping through reference books or writing notes on index cards. The smell of old paper and a touch of dust give the air a scholarly gravity. Alexei returns a thick textbook on materials science and checks out a novel by Fyodor Dostoevsky. He tries to balance his technical reading with some classic Russian literature for his own enrichment, and also to discuss with his grandmother Nina later. She loves the classics, and he likes to impress her with his reading. The librarian, an older woman with pince-nez glasses, processes his checkout with a kind but efficient demeanor, Libraries are serious business after all, and books here are to be handled with respect. Noon approaches, and hunger pulls at Alexei's stomach. Thankfully, it's time for lunch. He and dozens of others head to the student cafeteria, or stolovaya. The cafeteria is a large, bright hall on campus with long communal tables and a serving counter at one end. The aroma as you walk in is unmistakable. Freshly baked black bread, soups simmering, maybe a whiff of buckwheat groats or fried onions. A line has formed at the counter where white-aproned cafeteria ladies spoon out portions from big metal vats. The menu of the day is displayed on a chalkboard: cabbage soup, shichi, or beet borscht as a first course, choice of a main course between chicken cutlery, patties with mashed potatoes or boiled fish with buckwheat, plus a compote, sweet stewed fruit drink, or tea for a beverage. And as a treat, there are a few pieces of fruit, some wrinkled apples available. Fruit can be rare in winter, but by early spring sometimes they have apples or imported Cuban oranges if one is really lucky. Alexei grabs a tray and joins the queue. He's friendly with the matron ladling soup, and she gives him an extra dollop of sour cream on his borscht with a wink. In this small way, personal connections often add warmth to the daily routine. Maybe she knows he's far from home and wants to give a bit of motherly kindness. He gratefully accepts a thick slice of rye bread and a portion of the chicken patty with potatoes. It's not gourmet fare, but it's hearty and inexpensive, subsidized by the state for students. He pays a few kopecks at the cashier. Indeed, a full meal might cost less than 1 ruble here. Tray in hand, scanning the hall, Alexei finds a spot at a table where some of his coursemates sit. The noise of chatter fills the room: laughter, clinking spoons, a lively hum of youth taking a break. At his table, conversation ranges from classwork. Did you understand the professor's example? I'm lost, groans one student, about the morning lecture, to personal plans. We're organizing a hiking trip after exams. You in? Says another, referring to a popular pastime of going to the countryside or mountains with backpacks. One student excitedly shows off a foreign magazine he managed to get. It has pictures of American pop stars and cars. Everyone gawks with curiosity. Even in the Brezhnev era, Western magazines are a rarity, but trickle in via foreign students or occasional subscriptions. They marvel at the glossy pictures of supermarkets with endless products, fashions quite different from Soviet styles. It sparks a friendly debate. Are those consumer goods really necessary, or is it all bourgeois excess? The conversation reflects the mix of envy and skepticism common toward the West. It's a generation coming of age with slightly more exposure and questions, but still largely accepting the Soviet worldview that they are building a more just society, even if it is without the glitz. Alexei chooses bread and thinks of home for a moment, how his mother might be having a quick lunch in the school teacher's lounge, how his grandmother likely had a simple soup alone. He feels a pang and resolves to call home soon. Maybe on Sunday he can queue for the dormitory phone and try to place a long-distance call to Leningrad. It's a cumbersome process. You often have to book it in advance and wait for the operator to connect. But hearing his parents' voices for a few minutes would do him good. While Alexei finishes lunch and heads to an afternoon lab session, let's travel back to Leningrad. It's now around midday there as well. Irina, having taught 3 classes in the morning, finally has a short break. In the teacher's lounge, she sits down gratefully with a cup of hot tea and a couple of wrapped sugar cubes, which she tucks between her cheek and teeth in the Russian manner of drinking tea with a sugar bite. Around her, a few colleagues gather. The lounge is a modest room with a worn sofa, a coat rack crowded with teachers' cardigans and scarves, and a large table where a samovar occasionally steams, though usually they just use an electric kettle. There's an atmosphere of camaraderie in here. Behind closed doors, the teachers sigh and share small gripes or jokes away from the students' ears. Oi, today my second graders were little monsters, says one primary teacher with a dramatic flop into a chair, eliciting laughs. Another teacher, the maths instructor, chuckles and shares a couple of the hilarious arithmetic mistakes she saw on a test. One boy wrote that 5 times 8 equals 58. Perhaps he has a creative mind for numbers. They also exchange serious news. The head teacher announces that a city inspector's commission will visit next week, so everyone should be prepared to show exemplary lessons. A bit of good-natured eye-rolling follows. These inspections are routine, but always nerve-wracking, forcing everyone to be extra formal. Irina volunteers that they can perhaps have a student choir sing a welcome song for the inspectors, which would make a good impression. Immediately, 2 other teachers agree to help coordinate that. Teamwork among staff is essential, as resources are limited, but collective effort can fill the gaps. Lunch for teachers is often whatever they've packed or can grab. Irina unwraps a wax paper bundle with a couple of pirozhki, small stuffed buns, that she bought earlier from a bakery stand on her way to work. One is filled with cabbage and egg, the other with potato, simple, filling fare. She offers one to her friend Olga, the literature teacher, who in turn shares half of her own boiled sausage sandwich. These small kindnesses make the workplace feel like a second family. As they eat, they talk about an upcoming holiday. May the 1st, International Workers' Day, is a month away, and the school is already planning which class will do what in the parade. Irina's 8th graders might carry a banner, while younger ones will carry flowers or wave little flags. It's more pageant than political in practice, a festive day everyone actually enjoys, because it's a celebration of spring as much as socialism. They reminisce briefly about past parades, standing in Palace Square with balloons, the sun finally warm after winter, bands playing and everyone cheering. Such collective memories are dear to them. Back in the classroom after break, Irina teaches 2 more periods. One is Russian literature, which she loves. Today she's guiding a discussion on Pushkin's poetry, perhaps the Bronze Horseman, or some lyrical nature poems. The students, especially the dreamy ones, relish this change from factual subjects. A girl with a talent for recitation stands and passionately delivers a few stanzas by heart, and the class applauds. Through poetry, Irina tries to instill an appreciation for beauty and emotion, balancing the often utilitarian bent of Soviet education with some artistry. Literature class is also a place where deeper conversations sneak in about destiny, freedom, love, albeit carefully steered with an acceptable interpretation. Many students find refuge and inspiration in these great works, as does Irina herself. Her final class of the day is with her homeroom group again, a civics lesson focusing on current events. They read a short piece from Pravda about a new metro line opening in some city, and another piece praising a hero of socialist labor, a model factory worker who exceeded production targets. Students then must write a short reflection on what it means to contribute to society. Some responses are very earnest and idealistic, still reflecting the young pioneer spirit of wanting to be useful. Others are a bit perfunctory. Irina tries to encourage genuine thought, but she knows by last period on a school day, their minds are drifting. At the end of the lesson, the final bell rings through the school corridors. A collective scraping of chairs and a buzz of chatter arises as students prepare to go home. But for Irina and some others, the day isn't quite over. There's the pioneer meeting for her class and any others in the age group, since she, as homeroom teacher, also doubles as the pioneer troop leader for the 7th and 8th grades. She and about 20 kids gather in a multi-purpose room decorated with red banners and a large portrait of the founder of the pioneer movement. The atmosphere here is more relaxed in some ways. It's a semi-extracurricular activity, but still formal in ritual. They form a circle, and the troop leader, one of the students, elected by them, wearing a very crisp red scarf and a sash with some badges, calls the meeting to order with the salute. Always prepared, they say in unison, raising their hands to their foreheads. Today's pioneer agenda is to plan a spring volunteer activity. They decide to help an elderly war veteran in the neighborhood clean up his apartment and do some shopping. Irina is proud. This was partly her suggestion, but the students embrace it sincerely, keen to be helpful. They also talk about preparing a short performance for Victory Day, May 9th, to present at a local veterans' home, perhaps singing wartime songs or reciting poems of remembrance. Some of the kids propose ideas, and Irina loves seeing their creativity spark. One boy promises to bring his accordion to accompany the singing. Another girl, quiet normally, surprises everyone by volunteering to read a famous letter a soldier wrote from the front as part of the presentation. The meeting ends with a quick reminder to uphold pioneer ideals daily, to be good students, to help their families, to be honest and brave. They close with the pioneer song, a bright melody about the burning flame of youth and loyalty to the motherland. The children's voices ring out in the nearly empty school building, perhaps a bit off-key, but earnest. For Irina, seeing their young faces alight as they sing gives her hope. She knows adolescence can be awkward and Soviet life can be monotonous, but in moments like this, she sees genuine innocence and unity. While Irina wraps up her school day, Sergei in Siberia has been grinding through his shift at the factory. By afternoon, he's covered in soot and sweat, and his muscles are tired. But now comes a welcome pause, lunchtime. The factory whistle blows to signal a break, and the great machines gradually still. Sergei wipes his brow, leaves his workstation safe, and heads to the factory canteen along with waves of co-workers. The canteen is on site, a large hall with plain tables, the smell of carbohydrate-rich food heavy in the air. It may not be fancy, but these canteens are lifesavers for workers, providing hot meals so they can recharge. The menu at this factory cafeteria is similar to those everywhere. Hot soup, bread, a hearty main. Sergei grabs a metal tray and stands in line with his colleagues, jovially jostling and chatting as they wait their turn. The server, a stout woman with flour on her apron, serves each metal bowl of solyanka, a thick, sour, and savory soup full of cabbage, potatoes, and scraps of meat or sausage, perfect for replenishing salts after heavy labor. There's also kasha, possibly buckwheat groats, cooked with bits of beef, and a cucumber and cabbage salad on the side. And of course, endless bread. Black rye bread is on every Soviet table. Here it's cut into doorstop thick slices to satisfy hungry men. Sergei sits with a few pals at a long table. They peel off their heavy work gloves and set aside their caps. Eating with gusto, they banter to lighten the mood. One tells a humorous anecdote about how the plant manager slipped on ice that morning, but in a cartoonish stroke of luck, landed right on a pile of soft snow instead of concrete. Comrades, even gravity fears our boss, jokes, getting a hearty laugh. Another complains about the upcoming mandatory political education lecture scheduled for later in the week. An instructor from the party committee is supposed to come talk about the latest party Congress decisions. Better than extra work at the furnace, I say, shrugs Sergei. They've all learned to take these ideological sessions in stride. It's part of the job, too, and at least it's a break from physical toil. They will nod along as someone extols the factory's role in building communism, maybe even catch a little rest in the dark of the lecture hall if the speech is especially droning. The conversation shifts to personal lives. Mikhail, a welder, mentions his wife just had their second baby. Immediately, congratulations and backslaps pour in. A baby. Everyone's happy because more children mean more life and hope. They discuss names. The baby is a girl. Name her Nadezhda, which means hope, one suggests poetically. Another says jokingly, or how about electrificatia, since we're in the age of electricity, causing a roar of laughter. They also discuss everyday issues. Nikolai grumbles he hasn't been able to find new felt insoles for his winter boots anywhere in town, all sold out. Sergei offers that his sister in Leningrad might find some. He can ask her to send a pair. That's how shortages are often dealt with, through a network of acquaintances and relatives across the country. Need shoes, a spare part, decent toothpaste? Perhaps someone in a big city or another region can procure it and send a parcel. Talk of parcels leads to bragging about a recent care package one of them got from a cousin in Ukraine, full of homemade smoked sausages and a big wheel of salo, cured pork fatback. They decide that after the shift, those who are off duty can gather in the dorm common room to have a little feast of those goodies, perhaps with some home-brewed berry liquor one guy's wife makes. It'll be a good way to unwind, sharing treats from afar, singing some songs, there's always an old guitar around, and engaging in the timeless Russian worker tradition of camaraderie over simple delicacies. As the lunch break ends, one by one they knock back a final glass of hot tea, some with a spoon of sugar jammed in their cheek, as is tradition, and file back to their stations. The heavy work resumes, machines clanging, sparks flying, but those warm minutes of friendship and laughter carry them through the repetitive motions of the afternoon. In the stillness of Nina's village, midday has its own character. By noon, the sun is high. If it's spring, perhaps pleasantly warm. If winter, it's a brief but bright visitor. Nina's morning chores have unfolded calmly. After breakfast, she put on her quilted jacket and headscarf and went out to feed her chickens. In a little coop behind her house, she keeps about 5 hens, enough to give her fresh eggs daily and a sense of purpose. She scatters some grain and leftover buckwheat for them, cooing tsk 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 softly to gather them. The red-feathered ladies cluck around her feet. She checks their water. In winter, she has to break the thin ice crust for them. In summer, ensure it's fresh. One hen is broody, sitting stubbornly on eggs. Nina gently strokes its back and leaves it be. Those eggs might hatch into fluffy chicks if all goes well. Next, she takes a walk to the local shop at the village center to see if any provisions are available. The magazine shop is a tiny wooden structure that serves as the all-purpose store for the village. Its shelves can be famously bare at times, but it's a ritual for villagers to drop in, chat with the shopkeeper, and hope for some delivery. Today, as she ambles down the dirt road with a woven basket on her arm, she passes neighbors and exchanges a few words. She asks old Petra how his rheumatism is. He jokes it aches enough to predict rain, better than any meteorologist. She admires the snow fort some children have built in a yard. They proudly show her a snowman wearing an old Soviet naval cap. At the well by the church, the little wooden church is shuttered, used now mostly as a storehouse, but still a landmark. A couple of women gossip as they fill pails. They welcome Nina over. One, who is significantly younger, maybe in her 30s, asks if she has heard from her children recently. Proudly, Nina shares that her son Sergei writes regularly and that her daughter Irina's son is in Moscow for university. The women ooh and ah. A university student in the family is prestigious for a little village grandma to boast of. Nina modestly deflects, but inside she is beaming with pride. At the shop, a small stroke of luck. A fresh delivery came in this morning. A queue of maybe 8 people has formed inside. Queues are a fact of Soviet life everywhere, even in a tiny village store. Nina takes her place at the end, greeting those in line in front and behind her. They stand in the close warmth of the shop, which smells of yeast and pickles and sawdust. On the counter, under a glass cloche, a few loaves of bread sit, the daily bread delivery from the regional bakery. Each person can buy 1 loaf, as per the usual unwritten code to ensure all get some. There's also a tin tray with some hard candies, and behind the counter shelves with maybe sunflower oil, matches, soap, and some cans of sprats or peas if available. When her turn comes, Nina buys her loaf of black bread. She also manages to get a precious treat, a small packet of tea, actual tea leaves, not the herbal stuff they sometimes resort to. Real tea is always in demand, and she's happy to replenish her supply for when visitors come. Additionally, the shopkeeper announces they got a case of tangerines of all things, likely leftover stock from New Year shipments, but only a dozen fruits in total. This causes a stir. To be fair, they decide to distribute 1 per family until gone. Nina gets 1 tangerine. Holding the bright orange fruit in her wrinkled hand, she feels as if she's holding a rare gem. The citrus scent is heavenly against the backdrop of mundane cabbage and potatoes of daily fare. She plans at once. She'll save it for when her daughter or grandson visits next, so she can share the delight. Or maybe she'll bring it as a gift to her neighbor, Olga's little boy, who's been ill. That's how things go. A special item like this is either saved for loved ones or used to brighten someone else's day, not greedily devoured alone. Purchases done, she slips the bread and tea into her basket, carefully wraps the tangerine in her kerchief to protect it, and heads home. Afternoon in the village might mean some rest, but there's always more to do. She spends a little time tending her garden plot. In early spring, that means checking the stored potatoes and beets in the root cellar under her house to sort out any that's spoiled and preparing seed potatoes for planting. In summer, she'd be out pulling weeds, watering, shooing away cabbage moths, and later harvesting and preserving. But even now, she steps into her small greenhouse. Some villages have cold frames or tiny greenhouses to see if the onion sprouts she planted are coming up. Yes, tiny green shoots peek through the soil in a box. She smiles. Soon she'll have some fresh scallions to chop into her soups, a burst of flavor after winter's pickled fare. Feeling a little tired, Nina decides to allow herself a short afternoon rest. One advantage of older age and rural life is that she can heed her body's needs. She goes inside, places her new bread on the table. The smell is irresistible. She cuts a crust and nibbles it plain. It's still slightly warm, soft inside with a crunchy exterior. Absolutely delicious. Then she sits in her rocking chair by the window, a patchwork quilt over her lap, and perhaps picks up her knitting. She's working on a pair of wool socks. She is always knitting socks or mittens for someone, her family in the city, the neighbor's kids, or to barter for something. The repetitive motion of needles and yarn is soothing. The daylight slants in, illuminating motes of dust in the air. Outside, the village is quiet in the post-lunch lull. Even the animals seem to doze. It's a serene moment. As she rocks gently, her eyes grow heavy. The knitting drops to her lap, and she drifts into a light nap, lulled by the ticking of her wall clock and the far-off sound of a cow lowing. These midday slices of life, at school, at university, at the factory, in the village, show how daily routines in the Soviet Union were both collective and personal. There's a shared structure, lunch breaks, classes, set work hours, communal activities. Yet each person's experience within that structure is unique, colored by their relationships, their small joys, and challenges. Whether it's a teacher finding meaning in educating the young, a student juggling ambition with scarcity, a worker mixing hard labor with camaraderie, or a grandmother sustaining tradition and family ties, all are contributing in their own ways to the fabric of Soviet daily life. As afternoon stretches on, thoughts will soon turn to evening, a cherished time when work gives way to rest, families reunite at home, leisure and small pleasures come to the forefront. The sun will dip, lights will blink on in apartment block windows and village huts alike, and another rhythm of life will begin, one of homecoming, of supper and stories, of music and quiet reflection. Before we reach that evening hush, however, let's follow our characters through the gentle transitions of late afternoon, finishing work, running errands, and heading home to the promise of a warm meal and a peaceful night. Evening at home and around town. As the workday concludes and dusk approaches, a collective sigh of relief can almost be felt across the Soviet Union. Evening is when the public world recedes and the private, domestic sphere comes alive. It's a time for people to reconnect with family, pursue hobbies, or simply rest their weary bodies. In city and village alike, familiar evening scenes unfold. Lights flicker on in countless windows. The aroma of dinner's cooking drifts through hallways and streets, and people savor those precious hours between labor and sleep. In Leningrad, Irina steps out of the school building into the late afternoon light. The sky over the city has turned a soft watercolor of pale blue and pink as the sun sinks toward the horizon. There's a mild chill in the air. Spring is coming, but evenings are still cool, so she buttons her coat and adjusts her scarf. It's been a fulfilling but long day of teaching, and though tired, she feels content. Now her mind turns to home and the tasks waiting for her there. Preparing dinner, grading a few exercise books, and hopefully finding a quiet moment to read or listen to the radio. Before heading home, Irina stops by a nearby grocery store to see what she might purchase for supper. Grocery shopping in the Soviet Union is often an exercise in patience and luck. Shops, typically small by Western standards, with a counter service system, can be hit or miss with stock. Today, she joins a short queue at the meat to fish store. Each type of food often has its own store: bakery, dairy, produce, meat, etc., though there are some general ones too. The word on the street was that a batch of fresh fish might have come in. Inside the store, a broad woman in a white apron stands behind the counter, and indeed, on a slab, there are a few fat pike perch fish on display. They are whole, glistening, freshly delivered from the lakes region. Irina feels excitement, a stroke of fortune. When her turn comes, she is able to buy one medium-sized pike perch. The salesperson wraps it in thick paper. This will make a wonderful supper dish, perhaps baked in the oven with sour cream and dill. If she can get dill, in summer she grows some on her windowsill. She also checks the vegetable store. Root vegetables are usually available. She still has potatoes and carrots at home from the last time she queued, but she's hoping for something leafy or fresh. No luck today. The bins hold mostly cabbages, onions, and aging beets. She decides to skip, since she has enough staples for now. At the bread bakery, however, she does join a line and buys a loaf of her family's daily bread. The bakery smells heavenly of yeast and rye. There's also a tray of bulky bread rolls, and she impulsively buys 2 sweet buns sprinkled with poppy seeds, one for her and one for Victor as a treat. Carrying her shopping bag, a durable cloth one she reuses, printed with a pattern of blue checks, she heads to the tram stop. Commuters crowd the streets, everyone eager to get home. The city's atmosphere in the evening is a mix of weariness and a certain liveliness. Street lamps blink on, couples stroll a bit before dinner, and shops finish their trading for the day. She catches her tram after a short wait. It's fuller now than in the morning, packed with workers and office clerks returning to their districts. On the ride, she stands pressed among bodies, but her mind drifts to her kitchen and how she'll cook that fish. Perhaps pan-fry it lightly first, then into the little enamel baking dish with some herbs. She smiles to herself, almost tasting the dish. For a Soviet household, getting a fresh fish like this is a happy occasion. She anticipates Victor's pleasant surprise. By the time Irina's tram clatters to her stop and she walks the short distance to her apartment building, the streetlights are on and a bluish dusk envelops the courtyard. She steps in through the heavy wooden door of her building. climbs the dimly lit stairwell, greeting a neighbor, the librarian from the first floor, who is taking out her trash, and reaches her door on the third floor. The familiar scent of home, a bit of last night's stew still lingering, mixed with the laundry soap from the linens she left drying, welcomes her. Inside, warmth greets her as well, thankfully. She is pleased to see that Victor has arrived before her, and as he often does, turned on the radio quietly and perhaps started the tea kettle. Sure enough, the low sound of the evening news broadcast is coming from their living room. A calm baritone voice, reading out headlines about a new tractor factory opening, a meeting of farm workers, and international news about a peace treaty being discussed. These news reports are a steady, if sometimes monotonous backdrop to Soviet evenings, informative but heavily curated for positive content. Many people listen dutifully, if not entirely attentively. "I'm home," Irina calls softly as she enters. Victor comes to meet her, taking the shopping bag from her hand. He's still in his shirt and slippers, looking relaxed. "Ah, good. You got breads," he notes, peeking in the bag. Then she reveals her prize. She unwraps the paper slightly to show the glinting fish. His eyebrows rise. "Excellent. How did you manage that today?" he asks in pleasant surprise. She just smiles and shrugs, hanging up her coat. It's a small victory of the day. They move into their little kitchen together. It's time for the synchronized dance they've done for years, preparing dinner in a space barely big enough for two. Irina dons an apron and washes the fish in the sink. Victor, seeing she has the main dish handled, decides to take care of something else. "I'll peel some potatoes," he offers, rolling up his sleeves. It's not uncommon for men to leave all cooking to women, but Victor has never been averse to helping with prep, especially as peeling potatoes or chopping carrots is a straightforward task he can do while chatting. So they stand side by side in the snug kitchen, she scaling and gutting the fish, disposing of the innards in newspaper to be thrown away. He peeling a pile of potatoes. Over these homey sounds, the scrape of peeler on potato skin, the running of tap water, they discuss their day. Irina shares a charming anecdote of one of her pupils reciting poetry and a mild frustration about the inspector's visit next week. Victor talks about a tricky problem at the factory, a batch of capacitors that failed quality check and how they had to troubleshoot the issue. A subpar material delivery turned out to be the culprit. They speak of these things not as complaints, but as the fabric of their lives, each listening and nodding sympathetically or adding a light joke. It's therapeutic, these few minutes of debriefing the day while working with their hands, a gentle boundary between the public day and the private evening. Soon, the fish is seasoned. Thankfully, they have a lemon, rare but from a small stash they got a while ago, which she slices over the fish with onion and dill and placed in the oven of their gas stove. The potatoes are chopped and set to boil for mash. While everything cooks, Irina takes the opportunity to change out of her work clothes into a comfortable house dress and knitted slippers. Victor, done with peeling, ducks out to empty the trash with fish guts before it starts to smell, and also stops by a neighbor's door to return a book he borrowed. Such small interactions weave the social fabric of their building. You borrow a cup of sugar, You lend a screwdriver, you share yesterday's newspaper, you informally watch each other's children when needed. In the dim hallway, he chats for a moment with the elderly widow on the second floor, helping her carry her heavy grocery net bag up one flight, and she inquires politely about his family. It's all very cordial and communal. Back in the apartment, Irina sets the small dining table for two. Their table is in the living room corner, since their kitchen is too tiny for a proper eating area. She lays out simple earthenware plates, two sets of utensils, and the treat, the poppy seed buns she bought, placing them on a little saucer. Normally, dessert is not a nightly thing, but it's nice to have a sweet bite with tea once in a while. The room is cozy, lit by a standing lamp with a warm glow. On a side table, the radio continues its programs. After the news, a short segment of classical music plays, a gentle excerpt from Tchaikovsky perhaps, filling the apartment with tender violins. When Victor returns, taking a deep, appreciative breath of the delicious smells wafting from the kitchen, he turns the radio knob up just a tad. They both enjoy classical music, and Soviet radio often features pieces by Russian composers in the early evening. It's a source of culture and relaxation in one. At last, dinner is ready. They sit together and enjoy the meal. The fish is tender and flavorful. Each bite feels like a reward after weeks of more monotonous fare. They savor it slowly, talking intermittently or just listening to the music and clinking of forks. The mashed potatoes, whipped with butter, they have some butter saved for special uses, and a bit of milk, are creamy comfort. With each dish, they discuss things like how her mother would love this fish. We must invite Mama to stay for a bit when the weather is warmer, says Irina, and Victor agrees. They also mention their son, wondering what he's having for dinner in Moscow's dorm. Perhaps not as nice as this. Irina worries if he's eating enough. Victor teases lightly that knowing young men, he's likely on a steady diet of bread and sausage unless the dorm cooks feed them. After dinner, they leave the dishes to soak for a bit. No automatic dishwasher here, just their hands, which they'll use later. They move to the living area, where they both can finally truly unwind. It's about 7:30 p.m. now. On many evenings, they might read or do chores or prepare for next day quietly. But tonight is special because Vremya, the main TV news broadcast, is on at 9 p.m., and they plan to watch it. They don't have a TV at home. Many did by late 70s, but some still didn't, and perhaps they haven't afforded one yet. However, their neighbors on the same floor, a family of 5, do have a television set and often invite them to watch important programs together. Tonight, they had arranged to come by since there's also a beloved film airing right after the news. So around 8:45, with dishes now cleaned and set to dry, and a bit of grating done by Irina, she marked a few quizzes at the table while Victor dried plates. They both head across the landing to the neighbor's flat. This neighbor's apartment is a larger one. They have 3 kids and were allocated a 2-bedroom unit. The atmosphere inside is lively chaos, children playing with homemade toys on the carpet, the father fiddling with the TV antenna to get the reception clear, the mother cutting slices of homemade apple charlotte cake to serve to guests. Come in, come in. They welcome Irina and Victor. In Soviet life, it's common to drop in on friends or neighbors without too much ceremony, often in the evenings, when all can breathe easy. They all settle in the living room around the small black and white television set. On the screen flickers the opening graphics of Vremya, the nightly news program that basically everyone in the country watches to know what's going on, or at least what the state wants you to know. The children shush when their parents tell them to, and amazingly, they quiet down. The promise of cake after the news helps ensure their cooperation. The adults watch as the anchors report on the day, visits of Politburo members to factories, a successful harvest in Ukraine, a feature on a model teacher from Novosibirsk. Irina takes interest in that. Some international pieces showing a friendship visit from an African country's delegation. The tone is steady, somewhat dryly optimistic. Nothing too shocking is ever presented. It creates a shared feeling that all is orderly in the motherland and progress is continuous. But if truth be told, part of why they gather for Vremya is the ritual itself rather than the content. They murmur comments. For instance, when a segment on a cosmonaut training is shown, the neighbor father proudly states, "Our science is the best in the world." Everyone nods. One of the little boys exclaims he wants to be a cosmonaut, causing a chuckle. The news moves on to weather. Tomorrow looks chilly but clear in Leningrad, rain in the south, and then concludes with the familiar ticking theme music. Now the real treat, the film begins. This evening's movie is a classic Soviet comedy from the 1960s. One of those light-hearted, family-friendly films that people adore and have seen many times. The title card appears, and the neighbors cheer, "Oh, it's Operation Y," or perhaps The Diamond Arm. Both are famous comedies. Immediately, the kids perk up. They love the slapstick parts, and the adults grin, ready to enjoy the witty dialogue and charming characters again. Watching TV together is both entertainment and a social bonding. They share reactions loudly, laughing in unison at comedic scenes, finishing famous lines before the actors do, even lightly singing along if a known song comes on. It's as if they become one big family for those moments, united by common cultural touchstones. Midway through the film, the hostess passes around the apple, Charlotte slices, and pours tea for everyone using a big teapot with a cozy, and handing out glasses in metal holders. They nibble and sip, the sweetness of apple and cinnamon perfect with the strong black tea. The warmth of the drink and the humor on screen make everyone rosy-cheeked and relaxed. Little Lena, the youngest child, climbs onto Irina's lap. She's fond of the kindly teacher from next door and ends up dozing off there as the evening wears on. When the movie ends, with a heartwarming or hilariously absurd conclusion, all clap or sigh contentedly. It's already about 10:30 p.m. Time to call it a night. Bidding good night, Irina gently carries the now sleeping little Lena to her bedroom and tucks her in at the neighbor's request, the girl's parents juggling the other sleepy boys. Then she and Victor thank their friends for the lovely evening and step back across to their own flat. "We should do this more often," Victor comments, meaning not just the movie but the togetherness. "Certainly," smiles Irina, mentally thinking maybe next time she'll cook them something special or bring a bottle of homemade berry cordial to share. Back in their apartment, silence reigns. It feels especially quiet after the noisy convivial gathering. They leave the hallway light off, navigating by the faint glow through the window from the courtyard lamps. In the bathroom, a small one with a sit-down tub and sink, they get ready for bed. Water in the building is only hot at certain hours. They have central hot water, which is a perk. Some older buildings still rely on stoves or gas water heaters. Usually evenings have hot water, so Irina, feeling a bit of chill from outside, decides to take a quick warm shower. It's a brief comfort to let the day's dust wash away, and it soothes any aching muscles from standing at the blackboard all day. Meanwhile, Victor changes into his cotton pajamas and flicks through a few pages of Pravda that he didn't finish reading earlier. When she's done, he takes his turn to wash up, and she towels her short hair dry and dons a simple nightgown. On their bedside table, the alarm is already set for next morning, but now that little clock looks like a friend, telling them rest now. Before turning in, Irina remembers to do one more thing. She sits at her writing desk briefly and jots a few lines in a letter to her mother that she plans to send tomorrow. She writes by the soft light of a desk lamp so as not to disturb Victor, who has since climbed into bed and is reading by his own light. In the letter, she describes catching the fish and how tasty it was. Knowing how Nina loves those stories, shares that they saw a nice film with neighbors. Nina will be glad to hear they were in good company, and tells her to wear the warmer shawl now that spring nights are still cold. She ends with, "We miss you, and will try to visit next month after exams, if all is well." She'll add more later, perhaps, but for now, that's enough. Folding the half-written letter in her diary, she joins her husband in bed. He closes the newspaper, yawns, and switches off the lamp. They lie together in the darkness a moment, adjusting pillows, the weight of blankets comfortable after a long day. From outside their slightly open window comes a distant city sound, maybe the rumble of a late tram, or faint voices of youths strolling and laughing, or simply the wind rustling budding tree branches in the courtyard. Those ambient noises underscore the peacefulness of being safe at home. They talk quietly for a couple of minutes, little murmurs about who will pick up the dry cleaning on Friday, or perhaps noting that their son's birthday is coming and planning what parcel to send. But soon, their voices trail off as drowsiness envelops them. The contentment of a well-spent day lulls them to sleep. Leningrad's night will be short, white nights not far off in summer, but in those hours the city rests, and so do its inhabitants. Meanwhile, across the country in Moscow, a young man's evening is taking a different shape. Alexei, after finishing his classes and a stint in the library, has returned to his dormitory in the late evening. He and a couple of dorm mates decided to cook a simple dinner together in the shared kitchen. Pooling resources is common when money is tight and supplies limited. One contributed some buckwheat groats, another had a few potatoes and half an onion, and Alexei had a tin of meat, tushonka stewed beef, sent from his grandmother. They threw it all into one pot to make a hearty buckwheat kasha with meat. It turned out surprisingly tasty, and the three of them ate from the pot with spoons, joking it was the stew of friendship. After dinner, they linger in the kitchen, scrubbing the pot and talking. One friend has an old guitar and strums a few chords. Soon, a familiar tune emerges, a popular bard song by Bulat Okujava, gentle and philosophical. The young men sing softly along, mindful of quiet hours but unable to resist a little music. This impromptu kitchen concert draws a couple of others to poke their heads in. One brings a mug of tea to share, and a small, mellow dorm gathering forms. They discuss all sorts of things under the fluorescent flicker of the kitchen light. The upcoming summer break plans. One has to do military training. Another hopes to get a spot in a student work brigade to earn some money. The latest rumors of a new album by the underground rock band Time Machine, speaking of it in hushed excitement, since rock is not officially encouraged but widely loved among youth. And also the comedic movie on TV tonight, which some watched in the dorm lounge. Alexei missed it, being at the library, but they recount the funniest scenes to him amid chuckles. As night deepens, people drift off one by one to their rooms. By 11 p.m., the dorm halls are quiet except for distant laughter or a radio playing behind a closed door. In his small room, Alexei writes a brief entry in his notebook, not exactly a diary, but a place where he jots personal thoughts or quotes that struck him. He notes the camaraderie he felt today and how a simple shared meal can create kinship. Perhaps he also scribbles a line of poetry that popped into his head while singing earlier. These little reflections help him stay connected to himself amid the collective life. He then takes out a well-worn envelope, a letter from his mother he received last week, and reads it again. It brings him comfort, her gentle words about home and pride in his studies. He decides to respond before sleep. Taking pen and paper at his desk under the glow of a small lamp, he writes a letter home. Dear Mom and Papa, I am doing well. Today I ate very delicious buckwheat, thanks to Babushka's tinned meat. Please thank her and tell her it reminded me of her kitchen in the village. I attended all my lectures and even had time to go to the library. My dorm friends and I watched an old comedy, and it made me laugh as hard as when we watched it together years ago. I miss you and Leningrad's spring. Do not worry about me. I am healthy and busy. I promise to visit as soon as I have a break. Give my love to Babushka, your son Alyosha. He decides to post it tomorrow, knowing it will take over a week to reach them, but it's the thought that counts. Feeling a mixture of homesickness and warmth, he prepares for bed. His roommate is already snoring lightly on the top bunk. Alexei quietly changes into a t-shirt and shorts to sleep, folds his clothes on the chair, and then climbs into his lower bunk. He flicks off the lamp. In the darkness, the outlines of the small room are just visible. 2 narrow beds, a desk cluttered with books, and an empty tea glass, a poster of Yuri Gagarin smiling down. The moonlight sneaks in through the curtain. He lies on his back for a moment, not yet sleeping, thinking about his family under the same moon but far away. It's a clear night, so perhaps stars are out. He recalls how he and his father used to stand on the balcony at home, gazing at Orion or the Big Dipper. Here in Moscow's bright city lights, fewer stars are visible, but he imagines them above the haze. Those same stars might be twinkling above his grandmother's village, and above Siberia where his uncle is, and above all the different corners of the Union. The thought gives him a sense of a vast, shared existence, millions of people ending their day under that sky. With that comforting unity in mind, he drifts off to sleep, the muffled sound of someone's radio playing a late-night melody in another room lulling him. And what of Sergei in Siberia this evening? After the grueling workday, his evening is simpler but well earned. He finished his shift, washed up in the factory's bathhouse, scrubbing off soot and metal dust with vigorous relief, and then joyfully rejoined his family. If it's a weekday and he's been sleeping at the dorm, perhaps tonight he managed to take a bus home to see his wife Galia and little Kolya for a night, especially if tomorrow's shift is later or he has a day off. Let's imagine he does go home. The bus ride across the frozen landscape as the sun sets behind endless forests, a pale band of pink horizon as his backdrop. He alights in their town, a cluster of concrete blocks amid the snow, and walks briskly to their building in the early night darkness, eager to surprise his family. Upon opening the door of his small apartment, he's greeted with a squeal of delight from 5-year-old Kolya, who launches himself at his father's legs. "Papa," the boy cries, clinging to him. Galia, in the kitchen ladling cabbage soup into bowls, hears the commotion and comes running, wiping her hands on her apron. She hadn't expected him until the next day, and her face lights up. They embrace warmly, brief but tight, an exchange of love and exhaustion and solace in each other's presence. Dinner is reheated cabbage and potato soup and a loaf of rye bread, quite humble, but for Sergei it's ambrosia because he's eating with his loved ones. At the small table, he listens to little Kolya babble about kindergarten, the craft they made, the songs they learned. The boy also shows off a new skill, whistling, sort of, through missing front teeth, which makes them all laugh. After dinner, as Galia clears up, Sergei lifts his son onto his lap and asks if he'd like a story. The child nods vigorously and runs to fetch his favorite book, a thick, dog-eared collection of folk tales. They settle in the main room's couch. Under the soft overhead lamp, with snow quietly falling outside the window, father reads to son. The tale might be of Ivan Tsarevich and the Grey Wolf, or the Firebird, magical worlds that both enthrall the child and carry the father away from daily worries. Kolya fights sleep to hear the whole story, but by the time Ivan is climbing into the enchanted garden, the boy's eyelids droop. Sergei's voice gets gentler until the child is sound asleep against his chest. Carefully, he carries the boy to the little bed in the corner, tucks him in, and kisses his forehead. He and Galia share a smile. These moments are the treasure of their life. Tired but not quite ready for bed themselves, the couple sits for a short while side by side, quietly talking. Perhaps they sip a glass of weak sweet tea or share a cigarette near the cracked window, to not smoke near the child. They speak of mundane but necessary things, finances, needing to request new shoes for Kolya through her cousin who works at a shoe factory, scheduling a visit to her parents in a nearby town soon, and how Sergei's work is going. Galia offers to darn his work socks where they've worn thin, showing the small holes. He places his rough hand over hers in gratitude. These small acts of care mean a lot. They also allow themselves some dreams. Maybe in a couple of years, they might qualify for a newer, bigger apartment in a building with less issues. Theirs has weak heating on cold nights. Maybe one day they'll save up for a used car or a motorcycle with sidecar to get around. Eventually, bone-weary, Sergei readies for beds. He doesn't have fancy pajamas. Just an old cotton undershirt and shorts suffice. They have one main bed. He lets Galia wash up in the shared bathroom down the hall first. While waiting, He gazes out the window at the Siberian night. It's incredibly quiet. The factory hum is distant since he's at home, not in the dorm by the plant. The sky is vast and clear, stars like spilled sugar across it. The breath almost catches in his throat at the beauty and the cold seeping even through the glass. Sometimes, under such a sky, he thinks of his childhood in a faraway village, or the fact that beyond those stars, cosmonauts have orbited, and perhaps someday people will go further. Life can be hard, he muses, but these same stars shone on his ancestors and will shine on his son's future, and that continuity is reassuring. Galia returns, and soon they crawl under their heavy quilt. The apartment's heating is lukewarm, so they rely on layers of blankets and each other's warmth. She nestles against him. They whisper a few last endearments. She tells him to sleep well. He murmurs how happy he is to be home, and then the stillness of night envelops them too. Out in the snowy silence, one could perhaps hear the distant howl of wind or a lone train horn echoing far off, but inside their little home, all is calm. Finally, back in Nina's village, the evening has been exceptionally quiet and early. After her nap and chores, Nina spent twilight knitting and listening to her trusty old radio receiver. It's a big brown box from the 1950s, one of her cherished belongings. She tunes it to a station that plays traditional music at dinner time. Maybe some accordion folk songs or melodious choral pieces of Russian romance. She lights a small candle before her icons in the corner as well, continuing an old habit to mark day's end with a prayer for her loved one's safety. In the warm flicker, she whispers the names of her children and grandchildren, asking for blessings on them, crossing herself quietly. Though the state views religion skeptically, in her private home, at her age, she feels free to keep this bit of her soul alive. For supper, she had just a bowl of her own homemade borscht from yesterday, as borscht is always better on second day, with a spoon of sour cream and a heel of bread. She isn't very hungry these days, and anyway she's saving whatever better foods she has, like an extra egg or sugar, for when family visit. After cleaning up her simple meal, she double-checks that her little house is buttoned up for the cold night. She closes the wooden shutters, adds a couple logs to the stove to hold a slow burn, and makes sure her animals are safe. The chickens in the coop, her tabby cat curled near the stove purring. In the village, night falls deeply dark except for pinpricks of light from windows and the faint glow of a sliver moon. One by one, lights wink out as neighbors retire. Nina doesn't stay up late. Without television, her evenings are short. But before bed, she has one more ritual. She takes out her family photo album from a drawer. Under a kerosene lamp, she uses it to save electricity, plus she loves its soft glow. She turns pages of black and white photographs. Here she is as a young woman holding baby Irina. There her late husband in his army uniform after the war. Later a teenage Sergei grinning while holding up a fish he caught as a boy. She even has a photo of Alexei at his school graduation, looking handsome and grown. She brushes her finger over that one, marveling at how time flies. These images are like quiet company in the solitude. She murmurs a few words to her husband's photo. Our children are doing well. I wish you could see. It's a half prayer, half one-sided conversation, a comfort to believe somehow he knows. Finally, she prepares for bed. She lays out the thick blanket on top of the stove bed. Earlier, the stove was hot. Now it's just right, emanating a steady heat that will last most of the night. Climbing up carefully, with age she's slower, but she manages with a stool. She settles on the stove's broad flat top, where a small feather mattress and pillow await. The heat soothes her joints. The cat leaps up gracefully and curls at her feet, both of them enjoying this prime warm spot. Nina closes her eyes. Through the tiny gap of the shutter, a star's light peeks. She silently recites an old evening prayer, then lets her mind drift to pleasant memories, perhaps recalling a summer day when both her children were little, playing in the yard as she hung laundry, their laughter mixing with birdsong. She falls asleep with a gentle smile, wrapped in layers of quilts and decades of memories, under the watch of her ancestors' icons and the eternal stars above. Nightfall and tranquility. Night deepens across the Soviet Union, bringing with it a profound stillness. In big cities like Moscow and Leningrad, the roar of traffic dwindles to almost nothing. An occasional car or the clattering last tram might echo down empty boulevards. Streetlights cast long shadows on deserted sidewalks where only a late-night pedestrian or a patrolling militiaman might pass. In smaller cities and towns, darkness is nearly complete, save for pools of light around building entrances or the faint glow leaking from curtained windows. In villages, the Milky Way sprawls in full glory overhead, undisturbed by artificial lights, and the only sounds might be a distant dog bark or the creaking of a barn door in the breeze. Throughout these diverse landscapes, millions of Soviet citizens are now in their beds. Each has their own small world of dreams, worries, and hopes carried into sleep. Yet there is a shared feeling of repose, the collective breath of a society at rest, having earned its sleep through the day's labors. Inside Irina and Victor's Leningrad apartment, all is quiet. The little alarm clock on the bedside ticks softly, its luminous hands pointing toward midnight. The faintest city glow filters through the heavy drapes. The couple sleep soundly, Irina perhaps dreaming of her classroom. She often does, sometimes imagining a particularly lively lesson or seeing the faces of students from years past thanking her. Victor might dream of his childhood on the banks of the Volga, or envision tinkering with a flawless piece of machinery at work. Engineers even dream in blueprints, as he jokes. On the dresser, the postcard from their son stands, a reminder of family bonds that persist through slumber. If one could listen in the hush, maybe one would hear them breathe in unison, two lives intertwined in affection and habit. Not far away across the hall, the neighbor family is also asleep. The children, who earlier were rambunctious during the movie, are now like little angels, sprawled in various tangled positions in their shared room, limbs askew, mouths open in innocent oblivion. Their parents, exhausted from work and parenting, lie entwined, the mother's arm draped protectively across the father. They might subconsciously still hear the echo of the film's music or their children's laughter as they rest, their subconscious minds processing the day's events into gentle dreams. Down the street, the night guard at a local factory makes his rounds inside a silent plant, his footsteps the only sound in cavernous halls where hours ago machines thundered. He's a part of this nightly tableau too, a solitary figure under fluorescent lights, ensuring all is well while others sleep. In Moscow's dormitory, the pace of night is a little different. Some students stay up slightly later. One can see a couple of windows glowing where perhaps a group celebrated a birthday late into the night with quiet singing, or a diligent student burns the midnight oil prepping for an exam. But gradually, even those lights flick off. In the corridor, the resident advisor takes one last walk at midnight to ensure no one's making mischief. Then he too retires. By 1 a.m., the dorm is nearly silent. A distant flush of a toilet, the drip of a faucet not fully closed, and the gentle snoring or shifting of dozens of young sleepers behind closed doors is all that can be heard. In his bunk, Alexei lies in a dream. Perhaps he is dreaming of being on a train heading home, a common dream he's had, where he looks out the window and sees familiar landmarks, signaling he'll soon embrace his mother on the platform. Or maybe his mind conjures a fancy. He's a cosmonaut floating among stars, reflecting his daytime thoughts of the cosmos, feeling weightless and free. Either way, a faint smile graces his face. Unconsciously, he turns over, reaching to where at home his childhood stuffed bear would be. Here he just hugs a spare pillow. All is well. The Siberian town where Sergei's family sleeps, the deep cold of night has made the window panes frost over in delicate fern patterns. But inside, the little apartment is snug. The stove in the kitchen emanates residual warmth from the earlier cooking. The family bed is a warm tangle of limbs and blankets. At some point, little Kolya, half asleep, padded out of his own bed and climbed in with Mama and Papa, as children often do. Now he's wedged comfortably between them, the three of them forming a huddle of warmth and love. Sergei, in his sleep, instinctively rests a protective arm over his son. Perhaps he dreams of his boy grown tall and strong, maybe envisioning him as an athlete or a pilot, fulfilling dreams the father held. Galya might dream of her youth, or of a sunny day at the beach on the rare vacation they took years ago, something pleasant and removed from daily strains. Their town's single streetlight flickers due to the colds, creating dancing shadows on their wall. Outside, the wind might pick up, blowing powdery snow in flurries against the buildings. But inside their home, nothing disturbs their slumber except perhaps the soft murmur when Galya sleep talks a little, or the rustle of bedclothes as Kolya turns, lost in the carefree dream world of childhood. And far in the countryside, Nina too is in the depths of sleep atop her stove. The cat at her feet occasionally flicks an ear or changes position, but otherwise it's a picture of coziness. An old grandmother and her cat, illuminated by a sliver of moonlight that sneaks in where the curtain doesn't fully meet. The stove's warmth has slowed to a mild ember glow through the cracks. It's enough. Nina's breathing is soft and rhythmic. She might be dreaming of days long gone, perhaps of dancing in the village club as a young girl, or seeing her husband returning from the war. Maybe her dreams are more current, placing her in her daughter's flat in the city, playing with her grandson. In dreams, our loved ones visit regardless of distance. Whatever the dream, her lined face looks peaceful, even youthful in the dim light. Sleep erases years and burdens, revealing the contentment of a soul that has found its place in the world. Across the vast expanse of the Soviet Union's 11 time zones, countless scenes like these play out. In each communal apartment in St. Petersburg or Kiev, The feud and noise of the day are replaced by late-night quiet, when even that one drunken neighbor has finally gone to bed, and those sharing the space breathe easy. In each rural farmhouse, after the evening radio went silent, radio usually closed with the national anthem, then static. Darkness and quiet enveloped the inhabitants, except for the occasional stir of livestock in a barn or a dog shifting on the porch. Even in places where life is not so tranquil, perhaps a hospital ward where a nurse makes rounds, or a railway station where travelers doze on benches, waiting for connecting trains, there is still a lull, a collective pause in the forward push of life. The nurse walks gently, patients rest. At the station, the loudspeaker that blared departures all day now only intermittently cracks the silence, and people waiting sit bundled and quiet, heads nodding in semi-sleep. The natural world seems to join in too. The Volga River flows silently under ice in winter night. The forests of Siberia stand tall and mute under the moon, and the Black Sea's waves lap softly at dark shores. At this hour, differences between people fade. Whether one is a factory director or a janitor, a famous scientist or a humble farmer, a lively child or a wise elder, all lie down to rest under the same sky. The concerns of daily life, production quotas, exam scores, cues and ration cards, political slogans, and ideological debates recede. What remains is simple: the human need for restoration and the gentle hope that tomorrow will be a good day. In these calm night moments, if one could imagine a bird's eye view of the Soviet land, one might see the lights of cities twinkling sparsely, the countryside mostly dark, except for the occasional glow of a midnight oil lamp. It's as if the country itself is breathing slowly, recharging. And perhaps, in those moments when sleep is deepest, some collective dream visits the people, a dream of peace, of a sunny future that was often promised. Maybe it's symbolized by a bright morning field where children run free and laughing, or a harmonious gathering of all nationalities in colorful dress dancing in a circle. Such imagery often filled propaganda posters and songs, but here in dreams, it might emerge unbidden, a product of shared hopes. For all the challenges of daily life, the shortages, the restrictions, the hard work, people still harbored personal and collective aspirations to see their children prosper, to live in a world without war, to achieve something meaningful, to love and be loved. As the night slowly journeys towards dawn, the tranquility begins to very subtly shift. A few early risers, a baker, a dairy farmer, a tram driver, stir in their sleep, almost sensing their pre-dawn alarms coming. But for now, the darkness still prevails. The stars slowly wheel overhead in their ancient courses. In a few hours, the cycle will start anew. Radios will crackle back to life with morning exercises. Kettles will whistle. The sun will climb and wake the earth. The bustle and routine will resume. But at this moment, in this fragile and beautiful sliver of time, one can feel that peaceful unity of daily life at rest. What was daily life really like in the Soviet Union? It was filled with works and learning, with communal efforts and private joys, with challenges met by resilience, and with modest dreams nurtured quietly. By day, people toiled, taught, learned, cued, celebrated, worried, laughed. By night, they returned to the core of human existence, home, family, or solitude for some, reflection and renewal. In the stillness of this Soviet night, if you listen closely, you might almost hear a collective sigh, the sound of millions slipping into gentle slumber, the sound of lullabies hummed in multiple languages: Russian, Ukrainian, Georgian, Uzbek, each culture singing their child to sleep, the sound of pages of a novel being turned by someone who can't put it down, or the last line of a bedtime story being read in a whisper. It's the sound of day's end, universal and timeless. Soon enough, alarm clocks and roosters and factory whistles will announce a new dawn. But for now, night holds everyone equally in its embrace. It drapes over crowded communal flats and lonely dorm rooms, over grand city avenues and narrow village paths. It erases boundaries and conflicts, leaving only the gentle truth that at heart, every person seeks a moment of rest and comfort, a safe place to lay their head, and the promise of tomorrow. And in that promise, in that coming dawn that night's curtain conceals, lies the continuation of this narrative of Soviet life. The children will wake and get ready for school with sleep still in their eyes. The workers will don their heavy boots again. The teachers will chalk new lessons on the board. The shopkeepers will open their doors hoping for deliveries. The grandmothers will light the stove for morning tea. Life will go on, as it always does, in a rhythm both mundane and poetic. But for now, let us leave them to their dreams. The guided journey through a day in the Soviet Union ends in this sanctuary of night, where each character we've followed, Irina, Victor, Alexei, Sergei, Galia, Kolya, Nina, all find their personal peace. The last image might be this. Above, the twinkling stars over the vast motherland. Below, the gentle lights of a few windows glowing like earthbound stars. And one by one, even those lights wink out. In the darkness, a lullaby of the nation plays silently, the culmination of all the day's sounds now stilled. It is calm, immersive, almost like the country itself is whispering, sleep, rest, gain strength. Tomorrow we begin again, together. And thus, under the quiet night sky, daily life in the Soviet Union ends its cycle in tranquility, a tranquility as real and poignant as the bustle that preceded it, before the first light of dawn signals a new day's arrival, and the cycle of ordinary, yet extraordinary life begins once more.